Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Chof Tes in Bava Kama, as we learn for a chemical basis role. Let's take a quick look at the Mishnah on the bottom of Chof Ches Amral. Yesterday's Mishnah. Mishnah said it's a one-line Mishnah. Let's say Reuven's pitcher broke in Rosh Hashanah, and somebody else slipped on it and got hurt, or they hurt themselves on the shards of the broken glass, a broken jug. Then Reuven is chayiv to pay Shimon for the damages. Rabbi Yehuda remember miskaven chayiv only if he had kavana. Now, what does that mean? He had kavana. He had kavana to what? To drop it in the street. That's what it sounds like. Then he's chayiv. Ain't a miskaven potter. So Rabbi Yehuda says that it depends. The Reuven is not necessarily responsible. It depends on what his intention was. Whereas Rav Meir seems to say, listen, you dropped it in Rosh Hashanah and somebody else got hurt. You're chayiv. So we have this machlokas between the Tanakhama, we'll see it's Rav Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara on Chav Ches Amid Beis.
Why doesn't it mean that he was discovered to leave it there?
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk both. That's what we're going to talk about. Is it the kavana that he meant to drop it there or to leave it there? That's going to be the issue, and we're going to see the Gemara is going to come out. It's a good point you're raising. Today's Gemara is going to come out that the Gemara, they're really arguing on both issues. What's the issue? If he tripped, is that considered like kavana because he made a mistake, and or are we speaking about after he dropped it? Did he intend to leave it there? We're going to see he's talking about both. So the Gemara says on about 10 lines from the bottom of the page on Chav Ches days where we left off yesterday. What's going on here? What's the kavana over here? If you had kavana, what? Kavana to drop it? Here's what happened. He wanted to lower it. It was heavy. He had holding on to this jug or bottle, and he wanted to lower it down. And so if he had kavana, he didn't have kavana to drop it on purpose. He had kavana to lower it, and when he lowered it, it fell down. Okay, that's what that miskaven l'rida l'matmik said. V'niskal, and as he was lowering it, he stumbled, and it broke against the wall. Whatever. He's chayav. Why? Because it sounds like niskal is poshea. Because if he stumbled, that's considered negligence. You should have watch where you're going. Your responsibility. That's what it sounds like. If Yehuda says hechida, so hechem miskaven. Amram miskaven l'rida l'matmik seifa. Amalei abaya l'chadam chayv Rameir filu mifshra. Are you saying Rameir holds? Rameir is a Tanakhama. Remember, Yehuda says it depends. Did you have kavana or you didn't have kavana? Okay, what was the kavana? The kavana was I meant to take it down, I meant to lower it, put it on the ground, and it slid. And as I was trying to put it down, it fell and broke. So then I'm chayav because I stumbled as I was doing it, but I was trying to put it down. So the Gemara says, okay, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It depends if you have kavana or not. But the Tanakhama Rav Meir says doesn't make any difference. How are you saying Amalei Abai Mechlal? Zabai said to Rabba, even if it just slipped off by accident. You know, Rabbi Yehuda, you're explaining. Rabba said you explained Rabbi Yehuda. What's the kavana? I was trying to lower it. Okay, so you knew what you were doing, and then you stumbled. So there, Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv, and but if you didn't have kavana, if it was an accident, you would be potter. Reuven would be potter from damaging Shimon. Says Abayitim. So what is Rav Meir who disagrees? He says it doesn't matter about it, even if it slipped off, it was an accident or lane. He says, yeah, I'm chayiv Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds your chayiv even if the handle was still in his hand. Say he had a handle on the jug had a handle, and it just broke. He wasn't even his fault. He was just walking along, what they call fatigue, metal fatigue or glass fatigue, or whatever. The glue that held the handle to the jug broke. So that's totally an accident. He says, hey, even if he was holding on to it, just saying, you're still chayav. So it's an accident. We know that the Torah does not hold you responsible for things that are beyond your control. We call that an accident or some beyond your control. For example, in the famous case of a girl's rape. If a woman was raped, a married woman was raped out in the field, if she committed adultery, then she's chayav misa, like the adulterer. But if she was raped, well, you don't do anything to her because she was an accident, was beyond her control. Maybe that's only when it comes to murder cases. When it comes to I shouldn't say murder, capital cases. When it comes to capital cases, we say we don't let it. I believe in zaken. But if it comes to damages, just damages, then you're chayiv even if it was an accident. totally beyond your control. By the time we learned, listen to this. Now, this brisa parallels our Mishnah. Nishbarakato, let's say your barrel or your jug broke. Below sulko, you didn't remove it. That's what you were hinting at, Avram, right? You didn't remove it. Or nafal gemalo, your camel fell down. You didn't get it. You didn't, bring it up. You didn't rise up your camel. You didn't lift. Right? Says you're chayiv, your fault. Say you're putter. It was an accident. It was broke, or the animal fell, and somebody tripped on the animal, whatever. Say you're putter. As we'll see, this is Rav Meir and the Chachamim. This parallels machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda in our Mishnah. Here probably it's Rav Yehuda as the Chachamim, and machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. We try to go like Rav Yehuda in general, but here we'll see. Listen, it was an accident. You should have removed it. But the fact is, the animal fell down or the jug broke by accident. If somebody got hurt on it, and somebody got hurt, the Chum say, well, you're potter because you didn't really cause it. It was an accident. Okay, you should have removed it. Therefore, God will hold you responsible. But you're in terms of court, we can't be mechayiv the person. Okay, what is also if you had one of your items, an obstacle, let's say a stone or a knife or your load, you left them on top of your roof, and they were in a position where they could have easily fallen. Enough of would say they fell down in an average wind, a normal wind, because that's negligence. That's negligence. It's one thing where you're walking along and your pitcher broke or your animal fell down. Okay, so you should remove it, but if you didn't, then somebody stepped on it. It wasn't your fault, but this was your fault. And this is what we're really concerned about. Rav Meir is moted to the rabbis, but Malk and Kanal Gag. Let's say you put your jars, your bottles on the roof. You just put them up there to dry. They were wet and you were drying them. And all of a sudden a hurricane came along and knocked them down, and you didn't hear you didn't have a warning. Veheziko, and they did damage. You putter. Why? Because your putter, onus rachmana patra, even when it comes to damages. You tell me a girl is raped when it's a capital case. There, you could say that onus rachmana patra, you're not responsible for things beyond your control. But this is also beyond your control, even when it comes to damages in your putter. So you see, everybody holds of that. So how can Abaya's question to Rava is, how can you say that the machlokas in our Mishnah about what's the kavanah? Rav Yehuda says it depends if you had kavanah to lower it, then you're responsible. But if you didn't have to lower it, you're not. Okay, and right. So because that if you didn't have kavanah to lower it and it was a total accident, your putter. So Meir seems to say your chayiv even was a total accident. Elam Rabbi Savai changed it. He says no. Bitarti pliga. Listen carefully. Our machlokas is our Mishnah. The machlokas between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. Again, the Tanakam is assumed to be Rav Meir. Elam Rabbi Bitarti pligi b'shas tefila. They're arguing when it fell down, meaning when the jug fell down, somebody could have gotten hurt right at that point. The jug fell on somebody's head or damaged their whatever their stuff that they had there holding in the Rishus Harabim. The machlokes is after it fell down, if you for not removing it. If you stumble, are you considered negligent or not? Marsav niskal poshea. Rav Meir holds niskos poshea. Not like we said originally, like Rabba wanted to say that if your intention was to lower it and then it broke, you're responsible. And Rav Meir would say what? That you're responsible in all cases, even if it's a total accident? You're not responsible for an accident. The answer is yeah, there is a machlokas over here. The machlokas from Meir and Rav Yehuda is as follows. When it fell down because you stumbled, right? Is that considered negligence or not? Rav Meir holds in niskos b'sheh. You stumble. You're responsible for it. You're considered negligent, and therefore you have to pay. It wasn't an accident. Umar sover niskol b'sheh. Rav Yehuda goes no. If you stumbled and you had no intention to, even if you stumbled, that's considered non-intentional, and you're putter. And they also argue after it fell down if you didn't remove it. What's the machlokas here if you didn't remove it? When you're mafkir your obstacles, when you make a hefker. So is that bor or not? If somebody fell on something, you dug a pit or you left an obstacle in Rishus Harabim and somebody got hurt by it, that you're chayiv for bor. Again, Sure, you're not responsible maybe for clothing and kalim and things like that, or for a person who died there, but you're responsible for hishor chamor, or if a person got injured, as we had before. So people, but Rav Meir holds even if you're mafkir, even that's what hefker is. That's what bor is. Take a look at Rashi, right where the lines get narrow. Rav Meir Shapiro mafkir says chayev the bor shechayev of Torah, but when the Torah says you're chayev for bor, right? We all know chiyuv tachish bor, chiyuv bor, v'naf hasham hashor chamor you're chayev. What are we speaking about? He's speaking about bor b'shus ram to hefkeru chayev. But that's what we're talking about. So if you're mafkir, makes no difference if you're not mafkir or not. If you're mafkir, you're nechasim, you're chayev. You're chayev. So if you're mafkir something, just like you built, this is like you dug a hole in the middle of the shus rabim which wasn't yours. Makes no difference if you think, or if you put some obstacle in shus rabim and you made it hefker, you're chayev. Umar savar potter. Rabbi says no. You're potter. That's not the case of bor. Going on in that same Rashi, Rabbi Yehuda Savar Potter Sfile the Hifker Reshusa Velo Hifker Bor. When the Torah says it, you're chayev for bor. That's when you're in Rishus Harabim, because bor in your own Rishus you're not chayev. So you're mafker that Rishus, but the bor is still yours. That's what we're speaking about. If the bor isn't yours, if you're mafker, you're potter. That's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. Potter. So Mamela, what's the machlokes in our Mishnah? If you look back in our Mishnah, now forget about that. Rashi goes on. Take a look at Rashi a little bit further. In the same Rashi, B'Hacha Kamar, Rabbi Yehuda, V'Miskava Mishovra. If you had kavanah to break it, hiskiv b'nefila chayev. If you had kavanah to break it and you damaged it, then you're chayev. If you just were trying to lower it and you stumbled and broke, then you're potter. Niskalaf b'sheil. Now we can explain what the machlok is. What's the kavanah after nefila? What's the kavanah after nefila? We're saying, Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah, again, look at the words of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda meskaven chayev b'sheil meskaven potter. Now we're saying that there's two issues over here. One issue is when it fell down, are you chayev? Rav Meir says, you're chayev. Why? Because even if you stumbled, it's your fault. You shouldn't have stumbled. You should look where you're going. So if it broke, if you hurt somebody while it broke, while it fell down, you're chayev. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no. Nisko is la poshei, not poshei. You just stumbled by accident. If you had kavanah to throw it down, that's different. Misko. So again, says Rabbi Yehuda miskal show behizik menafil. Then you're chayev. But if you didn't have kavanah and you were just lowering it and you stumbled, you're potter. Okay, that's the first part. That marsav v'niskal b'sheya, marsav v'niskal b'sheya. Please, lachan afila back in the Gemara, lachan afila mafkin is marsav was chayev. That's Rav Meir. Marsav you're potter because when the Torah says you're chayev for bor, that's only if it's your bor. If it's in the Rishus Rabim, you're potter. That's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. Umimai. How do you know that there's machlokus? There's a double machlokus. Midik Tani look at the case in the Mishnah again. Concentrate on the words of the Mishnah. It says, Shimon, Ruvain dropped his jug. All right, dropped his jug full of water, let's say. And then it says Shimon either slipped on the water, or he got hurt, but with a shard from the bottle. Why talk about two cases? Just say Shimon got hurt, however he got hurt. It's the same thing. He got hurt. What's the difference if he slipped on the water that you dropped, or he got hurt by the shard? He stepped on the shard and his foot bled. That's why he's telling you two cases. When it fell down, it cracked, the water spritzed out, and Shimon slipped, was walking right behind him and slipped. That's b'shas nefila. The machlokas there is Reuven a posheya by stumbling, or is he not? Rav Meir says yes, Rav Yehuda says not. Oh, shalaka b'charsas la'ach nefila. After it fell down, and now the bottle or the jug is shattered, and there's pieces all over, and Reuben didn't pick it up, and now Shimon got hurt by it. That's the machlokas afterwards. So what's machlokas? Again, if you're mafker, you're chasam, this jug broke. Reuben says, okay, I don't care, I don't need the pieces anymore. It's all broken. So he made it hefker. Rav Meir says you're chayiv in that case too. Lachan afila. Rav Yehuda says you're not chayiv. Why? Because mafker nechasav is not chayiv. That's not bor. If your bor is only if it belongs to you. If it doesn't belong to you, you're not chayiv. That's Rabbi Yehuda Shita. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Now we haven't really explained what's the kavanah in the second case yet, right? The kavanah in the first case is that is something considered, is something considered kavana or not, according to Rav Yehuda. Stumbling is an accident, according to Rav Yehuda. If he had kavana, throw it down, that's one thing. If he didn't have kavana, he stumbled, no problem with that. What about afterwards? That will come to in a minute. The first thing Gemara says, since our Mishnah argues, is talking about two cases. One case where you chayiv when you drop it, and you chayiv afterwards for leaving it there. The Mishnah doesn't say it like two cases, but you see from the words, Rav Meir says in both cases you're chayiv, Rav Yehuda says in both cases you're potter. So what about the brisa that we brought down at the bottom of Chav Chesed Beis that we started with today? The case where your jug broke and you didn't remove it. You didn't remove it. It doesn't talk about it at the time. If you just said, the brisa said Nishbar Kata, and you didn't remove it, and then somebody got hurt. So it sounds like we're talking about afterwards only. So do you want to say that since the Mishnah, do you say that since the Mishnah is talking about two different cases? Again, damaging at the time that it fell and damaging afterwards, Bryce and Nami Batarti? We want to say the Bryce is also talking about two different cases, damaging at the time and damaging afterwards. How does that fit in with the words of the Bryce? The Bryce says if your jug broke or your camel fell down. Bishlam Makado, I can understand the jug. You could have damaged at the time that it fell down, either a shard broke or the water slipped on the water, whatever. But your camel, all right, I can understand what the shaila could be after it fell down. After it fell down, the question is, are you chayiv or not? Right, your animal stumbled, then somebody came along and tripped on it, got hurt by it. So the question is, mafkir nevela. So the question is, mafkir nevela, are you chayiv? Rav Meir says you're chayiv over there, and Rav Yehuda says that you're potter because that's not a bor anymore. It's not a bor if it's not yours. How can the case happen where your camel fell down and somebody got hurt when the camel fell down? Now you could say the camel fell down on top of a person, but presumably the person who got hurt came along afterwards, a minute later. So how does that b'shas nefila? So b'shas nefila, how does it happen that b'shas nefila? I understand the jug falling down, and as it fell down, somebody slipped on the water. But how's the case of camel? It's not that difficult of a question. He was walking with his camel in the water along the slippery shore of the river. Meaning, Rashi says that the river had overflowed a little bit and covered up the street, let's say the path, and you couldn't see exactly where it was, and therefore the animal couldn't tell the difference between the water and the road, and he fell down right there. So if your animal got hurt, if your animal caused damage to somebody right there as he fell, maybe fell on top of somebody or something of that sort, so you could say there was damage right there. If there's another path that you should have taken that wasn't so dangerous because it was a clear path, so Pasheyu, he's negligent. So he's negligent. How could there be machlokas there? Whether you're even the Chacham said if you're negligent, if you left your package on top of the roof and it would have fallen down on the regular wind, you're chayiv there too. So then you're posheya. How could the rabbi say? And there was the top of his page. It said the Chomer Moritz Rav Meir that you're chayiv over there if he's a posheya. If there's no other way to go, anusu. It was beyond his control. This is the only way that Reuben could get from point A to point B is by going through this path with the water. So why do you say that if we're saying the machlokas is at the time of nefila, whether stumbling is an onus or not? Okay, when a kata can understand. At the time that you broke the kad, you stumbled. Rav Meir says you're chayiv, but the animal is walking along. How can you say that the animal stumbling is something that you're posheabo? Says Rashi. If the animal fell, the animal fell. In other words, it's not like, couldn't get damage. The animal could do damage when he fell down. He fell on top of somebody. That wasn't the point. The point is that why is that poshea? If you stumbled and broke it, so we can understand you stumbled, that's your fault. Rav Meir would say that. But if the animal fell, why is it your fault? So first you want to say you took him in a dangerous place where the water was covering up the path and it was a difficult path. So if you had no choice, then you're not responsible. And if you had a choice, you are responsible. So how could there be a machlokas? What happened was you stumbled and the animal stumbled on top of you. Or when you stumbled, you pulled the animal down. So that's why you could have poshea at the time of falling. So in any case, though, we see that the machlokas and the Bryce again parallels the machlokas in the Mishnah. That the machlokas is both when you stumble and fell there, that Rav Meir says you're chayiv and Rav Yehuda says you're potter because niskos aposhea, and afterwards, after it fell down, after the animal fell down or the jug broke, there's a machlokas there too. Rav Meir says you're chayiv and the chacham say you're potter. What's the machlokas there? We said mafker zachav. Meaning if you make it hefker, Rav Meir says you're chayiv anyway. That's the bor b'shus harabim. You're chayiv. If it's hefker, that's what you're chayiv. That's what the Torah says you're chayiv. Rav Yehuda says no. The bor that you're chayiv is only if it's yours. If it's not yours, you're potter. So my miskavin, what's the mafkin? What's the kavanah there? Rav Yehuda says it depends if you had kavanah or not. My miskavin ika. Rav Yosef miskavin lischos b'charse. Here's the point: when your jug breaks in rishus harabim, what's the normal? A nice person would go get a broom and sweep it up. That nobody should get hurt, right? But what's the general idea? Do you leave it there? You say, well, it's broken. What am I going to take? Or do you have kavanah to acquire them back, to keep them? So Rabbi Yosef miskavin lischos b'charse. V'chen Rav Ashi miskavin lischos b'charse. If you had intention to acquire them according to Rabbi Yehuda, then it's yours. And if it's yours, then you're chayiv b'shus harabim. That's what he means over there. Rashi says here, even shalo ifkiran chayiv. You weren't mafkin them. You wanted to keep them. V'shem miskavin shuv lischos ben potter. The mafkin is potter. Again, Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you're mafkir, if you took a knife or you took a rock and you threw it in Rishus Harabim and you're mafkir it, Rabbi Yehuda holds that's not bar. You're not chayiv in that case. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds, and that's what we're talking about over here. That's the miskavin. Again, the miskavin is either at the time that I fell down. That kavanah means I threw it down. So if I threw it down and it's mine, I'm chayiv to pay. That's what this is miskavin. You're chayiv. V'shein miskavin. I didn't have kavanah to throw it down. It just I stumbled. I'm not responsible for the stumbling. What about afterwards? Afterwards, if I had kavanah to keep the pieces, then I'm responsible. If I didn't have kavanah, I'm not. Reb Elazar Omer, b'shas nefila machlokas. Now, Reb Elazar says an interesting thing. You look at the words of the Brisa. It says nishbar kara v'lo solko, nafla gama v'lo hamito. It's mashman. Then the person got hurt afterwards. He's emphasizing the idea that that after it fell down, what did you do? Did you remove the pieces or not? What was your kavanah, etc.? Meir says you're chayiv because he holds that even if you're mafker, it's still a bor, and the chum say you're not. So Rav Elazar Omer b'shas nefila machlokas. The machlokas is we'll see even b'shas, even when it fell down, even though the Brisa is not talking about shas nefila. It's not like our mission which says as it fell down, the guy slipped on the water. The guy right behind you slipped on the water. It says if you thing broke and you didn't remove it, your camel fell and you didn't stand him up and move him away. It's mash we're talking about afterwards. So he says, Rav Elazar says, what? What does he mean to say by that? After everybody says potter, that's the machlokas. Rav Meir says clearly you're chayiv in that case. When you left it there, you didn't remove it. Everybody says you're chayiv. He says machlokas is b'shas nefila. What do you mean to say by that? That after nefila everybody holds your potter. Rav Meir clearly says you're chayiv. Elamai, what do you want to say? That after nefila everybody says you're chayiv. Weikar upon the potter. Rabbanans clearly say you're potter. Elamai b'shas nefila, af b'shas nefila, even b'shas nefila. The kamashman karabaye. In other words, Rav Elazar is really saying the same thing about what was it necessary to say that? But why don't you just say ani kavaye? Because the Brisa says Rashi, the last Rashi, mishim delisha the Brisa lo mishtama b'shas nefila. The Brisa just talked about afterwards. You didn't remove your broken shards. You didn't remove your camel that fell down. So we're talking about only afterwards. Mishum the Brisa, the Rashi says mishum the lisha the Brisa lo mishtam b'shas nefila. It's Rav Elazar lashminan the dakim and masnisim. We see from Mishnah that the kani tarti kadam rabaya. In other words, even though the Brisa is only talking about afterwards, but you can deduce from the Mishnah where the Mishnah is talking about both at the time of that it fell down. And as well as afterwards, that the Brisa also means that, and he goes like a bay, the machlokas between your Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is both at the time it fell down, because Meir says if you dropped it, no matter what, even if you're trying to remove it, it's your responsibility. You stumbled, and if you left it there afterwards and you were mafker it, you're also chayiv. As Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you left it there afterwards and you weren't, and you were mafker it, you're putter in that case. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rabbi Dave, Rabbi Yochanan Melach Nefila Machlokas. The machlokas is only after it fell down. That's what it sounds like. Rabbi Yochanan says, La'achar Nefila Machlokas. Machlokas is only after it fell down. Ava b'shas nefila mai. What do you mean? When it fell down, everybody did a call potter? That's not the case. But Midikam Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi is going to say, and Daf Lamed Al, Lote Masisra. Don't say our Mishnah. He's talking about a different Mishnah. Don't say Lote Masisra Meiri Damer Nisko Poshea. Don't say our Mishnah goes like Rav Meir that holds Nisko Poshea. Mechlal to Rav Meir Machayev. It's Mashra to Rav Meir sells your Chayev. How can you say Machlok is after Nefila? What the Shas Nefila? Everybody says your potter. Rav Meir clearly says Nisko. Rabbi Yochanan himself says that Rav Meir holds Nisko Poshea. If you stumbled and it fell down, you're negligent. So Rav Meir's Chayev there. Elamai did we call chayiv? Maybe he means this. Rabbi Yochanan says lachnafil machlok is what? Avashasti Rabbi says you're chayiv. Well, Medikam Rabbi Yochanan since Rabbi Yochanan it's the same thing, same line. Since Rabbi Yochanan says come on lote masis Rameiri damanisko bashea mechlal the patra rabbanan. He says don't say a Mishnah goes like Rameir holds nisko bashea mashma that the rabbanan hold nisko is la bashea. So the rabbanan say your patra elah kamashmalan. This is what he means. Rabbi Yochanan means to say. The mafkin is asked of Rabbi Yochanan says lachnafil machlokis. The machlokis lachnafil is only in this case. Why? This case where it fell down by accident, right? What was the case over here in our Mishnah? It fell down by accident. Or Meir says you're chayiv anyway. Too bad, right? Even if it fell down by accident, you're chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says it fell down by accident. You're potter. If you didn't mean to throw it down, if it fell down by accident, you're potter. And this go is la poshea. Mashma the mafkos of the hacha who the potter up on it. The anusik was an accident. That's what Rabbi Yochanan means to say. In general, right? He says over here, when Rabbi says that your potter in this case, right? Because it was an accident, and he holds that nisko is lav poshea, and he says that afterwards, if you left it there, your potter, right? Because your potter, because it's not yours anymore. Only in this case where it fell down by accident. But if you took your stuff and threw it in Rosh Hashanah on purpose, it wasn't an accident, it didn't fall. One day you took out your stuff and you threw broken glass and stones and stuff like that. Even there, Rabbi Yochanan says, even Rabbi Yehuda would say you're potter, you're chayav in that case, because that's only in this case. Again, look at the words. When Rabbi Yochanan says Amar lachafil machlokas, lachafil in this case, the anusu was an accident. So even though you should have removed it, okay, you're chayav b'dinei shemayim. But since it fell down by accident, you're not chayiv since it's not yours and you were mafgrid. Ava mafgrid of the alma when you stomp through your stuff in the street. Even here in mechayiv itmar. Here we have the basic machlokas mafgrid because in the zakav becham rablazer chana mechayiv v'chana potter. So right away you see the Ram Seichel is on chayiv, right? Rabbi Yochanan, one says you're chayiv if you're mafgrid your stuff in Rosh Hashanah. That's the case of that's bor. That's the case of bor. You threw your stuff in mafgrid chasav. Whereas one says, no, you're potter. Where you're chayiv, you're only chayiv if it's yours, right? Right? It's only chayiv if it's yours. Says Mazvas, right? So lema manda machayiv Meir. The one who says you're chayiv goes like Meir. Meir says even if your things fell in Shusarabim, even if it was an accident when it fell down, and afterwards it fell down by accident. Maybe it was negligent or not, but it fell down. You're considered negligent, but was clearly an accident. And still you say you're chayiv, since it's hefker, even if it's hefker, you're chayiv. The one who says your potter goes like the rabbanan. So we have machlokes Rabbi Yochanan, so we don't know who says what. That's going to be the issue here. One says you're chayiv because Boris chayiv in Rosh Hashanah, even if it's hefker. Chanam or potter, no, you're potter. So maybe that's machlokes or Meir and rabbanan.
Quick question.
Yeah.
When it says mafkir nefasa, do you have to do it in front of like witnesses, or you could just say, and nobody's there? It's not mine anymore.
Good question. Generally, mafkir. Here we're talking about you just left it there and you didn't remove it, and you didn't mean to acquire it. It could be that it's not like you have valuable possessions, like you have your fruits in your yard and you say I'm mafkir to everybody like your Shemitah time. I think there's an assumption here that you don't have to make it hefker. Let's say somebody threw their cigarette butt out from the car in the street. Does he need it's hefker because a stum person wouldn't want to keep it anymore. Broken shards are generally considered. He left it in the street. I think it's automatic.
2,000 years ago, that's not true.
That what?
We have other Gemara who talk about what they did with shards.
Yeah.
They used it for.
So here's that we're going to talk. With today's Gemara, we're going to have that about maybe a person wanted to keep it. Yeah. So it's not. I would think that you don't have to actually have to be mafkir because it's assumed that people leave stuff and it was just around that they made it hefker. I think it's an assumption here. In other words, there's an assumed hefker that's chal. So this question, so is a machlokas here between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan? We don't know who says what. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan, we don't know who says what. But is it the same as machlokas Rav Meir and Rabbanan? The one who says that Potter certainly cannot go like Rav Meir. Why? Why? So, and Rashi explains. I'll leave it Rav Meir kol pligi. The hashta Rashi a little bit above. The hashta b'hafkin chasav habai they onus shemitchila chayiv koshkin hefkin chasav. In other words, if Rav Meir holds the case in our mission was clearly it fell down by accident, right? Okay, he says if you stumbled, you're considered posher, but it was an accident. And Rav Meir says even in a case like that, and you left it there, you're chayiv. Why? Even if it started by accident, certainly when you threw the stuff down there in general, you threw stuff into Rosh Hashanah. Are you chayiv or not? Certainly, Rav Meir says there you're chayiv. So the one who says that you're potter when you throw stuff in Rosh Hashanah certainly cannot go like Rav Meir. So I'll leave it Rav Meir. There's no way that he can come out like the one that says a potter. The Rabbanan would say you're potter again, that you're potter by mafker nechasav, right? Because you're only chayiv if it's yours. Man the potter Rabbanan, he'll go like the Rabbanan. Man the machayiv, the two between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lezer. The one says you're chayiv milchayin. I don't know if the Rabbanan. I can even go like the Rabbanan. I can look at Rabbanan mafker zaka the hacha. Where did the Rabbanan say you're potter? You're potter over here because here it fell down by accident. So if afterwards you didn't lift it up and you said, "I'll leave it there. I don't want it anymore." It was an accident. You can say. So the one who says Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan, one says that you're chayiv mafkan hazasav. He can even come like the Rabbanan. He can certainly come out like Rav Meir because Rav Meir says you're chayiv even if it fell down by accident and you left it there and you left it for hefker. Even there you're chayiv. So certainly if you took your stuff out of your house, you took rocks and broken glass and threw it into Shusarab on purpose, certainly you'd be chayiv there, right? Certainly be chayiv. But even according to Rabbanan, say you're potter because it fell down by accident. But if you did it on purpose, maybe you'd be chayiv. So we have this machlokas between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yochanan. We don't know who says what. One says mafkan zasav is chayiv, and that seems to be the halacha, that even if you make it hefker, but you threw it in Shusarab, you're chayiv there for bor. And one says you're not. So at this time, let's bring proof to Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Chayiv. Why? The Amar Rabbi Lezer, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Lezer said name Rabbi Shmuel, his Rebbe. This is important. Rabbi Lezer said name Rabbi Shmuel. Two things don't belong to you. But us on the cost of Gilead and the Torah said, you know what? You're responsible for them. They're yours, even though they're not yours. So he says, Bor b'shus harabim. What does that mean? Almas feel Rabbi Lezer, the chiv of the Bor b'shus harabim. It says Bor b'shus harabim. It's in the Rishus Harabim, it's in the public area. So it's not yours, it's a bor that you dug there. That's public property. And the Torah made it like it's yours. That's what Rabbi Lezer is saying in Mishmal. So it's like yours, you're responsible even when it's totally not yours, right? You can't own it anymore. You can't. It's chametz after midday on Erev Pesach, right? Is asur ba'na. You can't have it. Doesn't belong to you anymore. But if you have it in your rishus, you're chayiv. So that's the idea that it's not yours. But the Torah made it like it's yours, that you're responsible for it, whether being chayiv for Nezakan and Bor B'Shus Rabin, or being chayiv for Ba'yirav Ba'ymotzei after midday on Erev Pesach. So what do you see over here? That Rabbi Lezer said, name Rabbi Shmuel, these two things are not yours. It's like your mafkarit, your Bor B'Shus Rabin was never yours to begin with. I go into the middle of the street and I dig a hole there, it's not mine, yet I'm chayiv for it. So you see over there the same idea that even if you're mafkar something, it doesn't belong to you, you're chayiv. Right, that's right. Even though it's not yours. So that's what. So to Simon, that's a good proof that Rabbi Lezer said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel that you're chayiv for bor even if it's not yours, even if you're mafkrit. Says Mar Mir Rabbi Lezer. Did Rabbi Lezer really say that? But Rabbi Lezer, if we find, he says the other way around. The time person comes along some dung in Rosh Hashanah. If you ever walk the streets here, you'll find dung in Rosh Hashanah. That's where the animal, the dog owners leave it. So what happened was there was some dung in Rosh Hashanah or fertilizer, whatever you want to call it, and the person pushed it around. He pushed it around. Hopefully he turned it over, like he pushed it around. Now and now Shimon, another guy, came along and got hurt because Reuben had pushed it to another spot. Chayav Venisko, he's chayav to pay. Had it just been he left it alone and not my responsibility. But I pushed it and put it somewhere else. Somebody left a pile of dung and I pushed it somewhere else and somebody got hurt. Chayav. Rabbi Lezer about that. Lo shenel mishnas gavin lischus, but that's only if I meant to acquire it. when I picked it up, I moved the dung, or I kicked it, let's say whatever happened, I moved it, I meant to acquire it, so it's mine. Avlonis gavlos, but if I didn't want to keep it, I'm potter. So what do you see over here? Alma, mafna zachar potter. If I didn't mean to keep it, right? I didn't mean to acquire it. I just, whatever was there, I didn't mean to keep it. Al mafna zachar is potter. And Rashi says, Avlonis gavlos could be a potter. Even though when I moved it around and somebody got hurt, it's as if I dug a bore there. If had I left it where it was, the guy wouldn't have gotten hurt. Amal or Blazer, bor b'shus ramas potter. Just like a bor b'shus ramas potter, same thing on mafna zachav. The man de machayev, here Rashi says, the man de machayev b'bor b'shus rabim yolafla shalosh shalaisam olam was never there, never yours at all. So over here also it's the same idea. Amal or b'shus ramas potter, but in the mafna zachav. If you're mafkin your obstacles, the same thing applies. It's not yours. The man the machayev bor b'shus rabim yolafla was never yours. So if it doesn't belong to you, you're potter. The same thing, and there's no difference if I dig a hole in Rishus Rabim, it's not mine, or if I mafker it, I leave just something in potter. So you see the old your potter, because he says, if I didn't have kavanah to acquire it, even if I kicked it somewhere else, I'm potter. So what do you see? That you're potter, not the Rabbi says, no. Here what happened was, I kicked the dung around, but I put it back in its place. That's why he says, that's what he means over here. So he says, so that's why you're potter, because you never really did anything. You didn't do anything. You just kicked it around, but you put it back in its place, like you picked it up and put it right back. You never touched it. That's why you're potter. In other words, we're trying to still defend the position that Rav Lazar holds that mafkin chosav is chayev, mafkin zakav chayev. Over here, why does he say you're potter if you didn't mean to acquire it? Because you didn't really move it. So Ravina, Mashal Rabada Baraba, the example that he gives is I'll give you an example of what he's saying. He's saying that this dung moved around, but you put it back in its place. So you really didn't move anything. I mean, Mashal Rabada Baraba, what's it compared? Lamosi Bor Magula. It's like you found that you're walking on the street, you find an open pit. And you covered it up. Then you lifted it back up. You took off the cover. So you didn't do anything. That's what you think of. Amalei Marzutra Breder of Mari Ravina. Midami, how can you compare this case where he picked up the dung or kicked it around to the case of finding an open pit, covering it, and then removing the cover? Hasam lo estalik lamaisa risham. Over there, you have not undone the first thing. In other words, number one came along and dug a pit. You came along and covered it up. Then you took off the cover. Did you do anything at the end of the day? You did nothing. You didn't undo what the first guy did. The first guy's pit was still there. You just put a cover on it temporarily and you took off the cover. You haven't undone what he did. But over here, when you picked up the dung or kicked it around, you undid what he did because the dung wasn't there anymore in that spot. And now you put it back. This is comparable to the case of Bor Magula. This case of the dung is comparable to finding an open pit. And you filled up the pit. Right? And then you redug it. What the first guy did, you undid, right? It wasn't like you just the pit was the same pit. And you covered it up and you took it off, you didn't undo what he did. But if you find a pit and you filled it up, it's no longer a pit. Now, when you redug it, you did the pit. That's what this is comparable to. So you've done it. Right? Now you've done it. So that's not the same thing. So if you move this around, what do you mean over you put the dung back where it was? You still did it. If there was dung, if there was a pile of dirt or fertilizer, call it whatever you want. There was some obstacle in Rosh Hashanah, and I went and I picked it up and I said, you know what? Why am I responsible for it? I put it right back. I put it back. It wasn't where it was, even if I put it back in the same spot, but I put it there now. It wasn't what the first guy did is undone. It was moved away. If you would have the camera looking, you will see that there was a time when it wasn't there and I put it back. Elom Ravashi. So again, why over here are you potter? Doesn't make sense to say if Rav Lazar holds your potter, you can't. If Rav Lazar holds that mafkin and zakav yochayev, why over here would you be potter? What happened was he never really lifted it up. He just kicked it around less than 3 tefachim off the ground, so he never picked it up. Why do you have to give this example and say he just kicked it around the fachos megimel? The time of the chinas gavan lischosba, hayin miskavan lischosba, low. In other words, he said, when are you chayev? If you had kavanah to acquire it, right? you didn't kick it around much, but if you didn't have kavanah to acquire it, you didn't really do anything. Look at Mamigim of say you're chayiv. If you say that you're mafkin zakah, you're chayiv. Talk about even if you picked it up above gimel, even though you didn't have kavanah to acquire it, but you're chayiv because mafkin chasim. Even if you didn't want to acquire it, if you picked up something and you put it down, even if you're mafkir, according to Rav Elazar, you're chayiv. The reason you give that example because the mission didn't make sense. What's that lashon? If you look at the words, hahofech has a goal. You turned over the dung of Rishus Rabbim. Talk about what? Let's take say if you lifted it up. If you lift it up, you say you're chayiv. The answer is hafach means it means to say you turned it over, you didn't really pick it up. So that's what it means to say over here. This wasn't ever yours. If you picked it up, even if you're mafkir, you're chayiv because he holds that mafkir was chayiv. The reason you're potter is you didn't really do anything. You just kicked it around a little bit. You didn't do anything. So the Gemara says still stands its defense that Rav Elazar holds that mafkin zakav you're chayiv, like the psak apparently is. Mid Rav Elazar machayiv mashma then Rabbi Yochanan or potter, because we start off this Gemara by saying there's a machlokas here mafkin zakav by chayiv or potter. There's a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Rav Elazar. We don't know who says what. So we prove from the case of chametz and bar b'shus rabim that Rav Elazar says apparently you're chayiv. So if Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi says Yechayev, the Mashma Rabbi Yochanan are Potter. We're at the first of the wide lines of the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan really say that Mafkin Achasav is Potter, right? And Mafkin Nezakav rather is Potter. Let's say you hit some thorns in Rishus Rabbim, right? And as you put a damage and you put an obstacle there, Besas Chuchis or glass, Vahagoda Gidro. Because normally walls are built with stone. Let's say you built your wall facing the Rishus Rabbim with thorns, or your stone wall that fell into Rishus Rabbim. All these cases, you've caused damage to Rishus Rabbim. Behuzik ben Achron, somebody else got damaged. Chayiv ben Isker, you chayiv to pay. That's what the Mishnah says. Rabbi Yochanan says, that's only if your thorns in your wall projected out to Rishus Rabbim. But if it was all included in your potter, but my time of potter, why are you potter? Because it's in your rishus. But if it would be in rishus rabim, you're chayev. Even if it's yours and you're mafkir rishus rabim, you're chayev. He says the reason why your potter is why because it's in your rishus. But if you would throw it out into the rishus rabim, you'd be chayev even if you're mafkir it. Because he says you're potter only if it's in your rishus, but if it's 6 out of Rishus Rabbim, you're chayiv even if you're mafkir. So you see, Rabbi Yochanan holds that you're chayiv even by mafkir zakav also. So you must know lo l'meim l'chol mafkir zakav is potter. Umitzam samaitam a potter. Mafkir is a potter. Mitzam why you potter? Bishum di itmar lo amar ba'achav arbeid ravika. If he shein darken shal b'nei mischacha b'ksam. Don't make a deduction and say that if the thorns are within your rishus, then you're potter. But if they fell into Rishus Rabbim, you're chayiv. Even if you're mafkir, no. The reason why you're potter, if it's in your rishus, is because people don't normally walk around rubbing against the wall. So therefore you're potter. But in Rishus Rabbim, if it was in Rishus Rabbim, you're chayiv. Nothing to do with it's yours in Rishus Rabbim, whether you're mafkir in Rishus Rabbim or not. But still, me and Rabbi Yochanan did Rabbi Yochanan really say that mafkir and zakav is potter. But Rabbi Yochanan alocha kestam mishnah. Alocha is like a stam mishnah. The time we learn a stam mishnah, we're going to have later on hachofer bor b'Rishus Rabbim. This is a classic case of bor. I dug a bore which is ram benafal tocho shor chamor umeis and the animal died shor below kalim umeis yochayev. No, if you dig it in Rishus Rabbim, there's no bigger hefker than that. It's not mine, right? It's not mine. You can't you clearly that a chov Rishus Rabbim yochayev. So you see clearly that he holds that bor that you're chayiv on is even if it's not yours. Rabbi Yochanan clearly says that. Elul olam Rabbi Yochanan. So because we have a clear Mishnah which says Rabbi Yochanan's halacha like a stam Mishnah. The stam Mishnah says that you're chayiv on bor when it's not yours, when it's hefker or not yours. So therefore it must be Rabbi Yochanan holds that mafkan zakov is chayiv. Elul Rabbi Yochanan chayiv. Umid Rabbi Yochanan chayiv. If Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayiv, and that's very clear, Rabbi Elazar potter. Rabbi says you're potter. But wait a minute. But we talked about the case before with the chametz and the bor b'Rishus Rabbim that you're chayiv there. The Torah made it like it's yours. You're chayiv. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Elazar said before that you're chayiv in that case. That Hashem made it like it's yours and you're chayiv. So you see, Rabbi Elazar says you're chayiv. Lo kasha hadidei harabei. Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says mafkan zakov is chayiv, and that's the halacha. He passing that way. Rabbi Lezer's your potter. Rav Lezer said, name of Rabbi Shmuel that you're chayiv. That was the name of Rabbi Shmuel. That's his Rebbe holds that. But that's his Rebbe holds that. But he himself holds that you're potter. Right? So therefore, Rabbi Lezer comes out as the one who says that Machno Zakov is potter, and Rabbi Yochanan says Machno Zakov is chayiv, and that's the basic machlokas of what's the definition of bor. Yesterday we had also about Rav and Shmuel. Remember, Rav said that Parka Olam Aziko in the case like that because you're only chayiv on bor. Remember chayiv on bor also if it's hefker, right? Only if it's hefker. And Shmuel said it doesn't make any difference. So we have this issue about bor b'shus ram is chayiv that if it's yours or if it's not yours, we have this machlokus in several places. All right, tomorrow's daf will be on the podcast as Daf Lamed. And on Sunday, we'll pick it up from the mission at the top of Lamed Aleph. Shabbat Shalom, Surot Tovot V'Kulam. Rumi, you saw the video with what Tzvi was interviewed on TV?
No.
You didn't see it? I'll send it to you now.
Okay, thanks. Beautiful.